Hi, my name is Przemek Chojecki and this episode is about what will happen with our economy after coronavirus and during it. Actually, I have written an article and where I started to compute some of the things, looking up the numbers related to economy. I'm just showing you this article. It's available on Medium. I will give you a link below that so you can have and check all the numbers for yourself. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but actually, what's going probably to happen is that we're going to hit a major financial crisis, similar to the one in 2008, but probably much worse. So main takeaways, main assumptions of this text. The first one is assumption. The second one is the takeaway. So we're probably going to see that Europe and the US will be in a total lockdown from April to June, and then at 16% working capability from June to August 2020, while slowly getting back to normal. And I will comment that later on where it comes from, but basically this data comes from data from China, where the situation is much better right now. And the second takeaway is the first point will going to cause basically a major financial crisis because most of the businesses will be shut down, all the non-essential businesses are going to be shut down, and we're already seeing that in place in the UK, France, Germany, Poland, everywhere basically in Western countries right now, with also India taking some hard measures from I guess today. So it's really going to happen soon, and I'm taking this April to June because of that, because we're just getting into the total lockdown period. So yeah, so this is the working assumption. 2 months of heavy restrictions and then 2 months of 60% capability, and it's basically dictated by the data from China. I linked to many articles that I've read, that I've basically taken this information from. It's coming from, so for example, if you look at the Hubei province where Wuhan lies, where everything started, they started the total lockdown on 23rd of January, and basically end of February, beginning of March, some of those measures were uh, taken out, and now everything is back to normal, more or less, because as according to Bloomberg Economics and then also confirmed by New York Times, Chinese factories are operating at 60 to 70% capability in the last week, so it's not totally back to normal. So also, if you look at Starbucks, they reopened 85% of the coffee shops in China. Many businesses are still working remotely. I read about Alibaba and other tech giants in China. So not everything is back to normal, but they're already working remotely, and that's really great. That's great news for us that you can overcome uh, this pandemia by staying at home, basically. So yeah, so this is where my assumptions came from, and I guess that we're saying the same in the UK, US, and other Western countries. So for example, Italy is under lockdown already, with Poland, France, Spain also following similar measures, and that's why my assumption. I call this model two. Uh, 2 months of total lockdown, 2 months of 60% capability, and I'm computing GDP losses based on that. So if you look at GDP losses, so that's a good measure for some things. At least it can evaluate whether you get a crisis or not, but it's not a perfect measure, of course. But I decided to look at it because that's very tangible. That's something we can compute with numbers. And I basically looked at two industries which are probably touched the most, influenced the most with coronavirus lockdown, and that is tourism on one hand and manufacturing on other. So basically, tourism is all shut down. The travel is almost non-existent, suspended. So basically, I'm computing that everything is going to zero in the next 2 months, and then at 60% we're coming back. Uh, and if you assume that, then basically this is the computations I've made. Uh, in the end, you can read that later on, but in the end, we probably get something around $2 trillion losses worldwide for tourism, and that makes around 2.2 of global GDP. So this is the level, and if you were to compare that to financial crisis, because it's always good to compare to something, then basically the losses taken during the financial crisis are something between 2.4 in 2008 and 5% 73 in 2009. So again, this is already close to that. Yeah, year 2009 was probably the worst because of all the effects that compounded in 2008 and 2009. So firstly, already lockdown of tourism might cause a meltdown at the level of financial crisis, and actually that might lead to bankruptcies of some of the countries who rely very strongly on tourism. So for example, Greece, also some countries in Africa, in Western Europe, that might be really terrible. So that's one thing. The other thing is manufacturing. So because factories are stopping to work, again we're seeing that in China, and this is where this model is based on. So again, 2 months of lockdown, 2 months at 60% capacity, and if you start computing that and take into account that manufacturing is 60% of global GDP, then basically what you get is losses at the level of 3.5 trillion, so even more than in tourism. And in the end, if you take all that together, then you get losses at the level of 5.5 trillion dollars, or roughly 6.2% of global GDP, which means this is more than we have taken in 2009. Yeah, so we're probably facing the much larger financial crisis, and this doesn't even take into account other domains of global economy. So, for example, small businesses, which will be heavily touched in almost every industry, because it was computed basically by JP Morgan for different surveys that an average small business can only survive 27 days without cash inflow all the time. And that's basically the cash reserve for an average business, for a median business, for a median small business is 27 days. Yeah, so basically we're going to face a global crisis scenario within the next 2 months, and we can already see that happening because on most major stock exchanges, everything fallen down by 30 to 70% already, and some of that might still go down as there will be more measures in place, as people stop working, stop spending money in the amount that was spent already during the year. So that might be hard. Yeah, the other thing is, of course, the number of jobs that we're going to lose. So in the US, the 2008 made people lose 2.6 million jobs. And here we're talking about dozens of millions of people being laid off because factories are stopping, because small businesses are closing, and this might be even worse. So that's the point. That's definitely a point to think about. Yeah, so that's what this text is about. I give you a link below for you to read all the necessary data. The scenario is pretty grim. I hope I'm wrong to some extent, but we'll see what happens. Thank you for listening. Let me know what you think about it. Please subscribe to the channel and see you in the next episode.